In the summer of 1933, a retired Marine Corps Major General named Smedley Butler received a strange visitor at his home in Newton Square, Pennsylvania. The visitor represented some of the wealthiest men in America, and they had a proposition. They wanted Butler to lead 500,000 veterans in a march on Washington, force President Franklin Roosevelt to step aside, and install a fascist government. Butler had two choices: become America's Mussolini or expose the biggest corporate conspiracy in US history. He chose to expose it. This is the story of how America's most powerful corporations, DuPont, J.P. Morgan, Goodyear, and others, actually plotted to overthrow a sitting president, how they nearly succeeded, and how they all got away with it. And everything I'm about to tell you was confirmed by a congressional investigation. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is documented history that's been buried for 90 years. To understand why corporations wanted to overthrow FDR, you need to understand what was happening in 1933. The Great Depression had destroyed America. Unemployment hit 25%. Banks were failing. People were starving. And Franklin Roosevelt had just been inaugurated with a radical plan, the New Deal. The New Deal meant regulations. It meant labor unions. It meant higher taxes on the wealthy. It meant the government would actually intervene in the economy to help ordinary people. And America's corporate elite, they were terrified. See, while regular Americans were losing their homes and standing in bread lines, these corporations were still making money. DuPont's profits were up. J.P. Morgan was consolidating power. The wealthy were doing just fine. But FDR's policies threatened to change that. Labor rights meant higher wages. Banking regulations meant less profit. Taxes meant, God forbid, they'd have to contribute to society. So they started looking at what was happening in Europe. In Italy, Mussolini had created a corporatist state where big business and government merged. In Germany, Hitler was crushing labor unions and handing power to industrialists. And these American businessmen thought, why not here? Here's who was involved, according to Butler's testimony and the congressional investigation. Grayson Murphy, director of Goodyear, Bethlehem Steel, and a group of Morgan banks. He organized the funding. Robert Sterling Clark, heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune, who pledged $3 million in initial funding. That's $69 million in today's money. The DuPont family, owners of the massive chemical empire, terrified of New Deal regulations. Representatives from J.P. Morgan and Company, the most powerful bank in America. Al Smith, former Democratic presidential candidate who'd turned against FDR, and the American Liberty League, a front group funded by these exact corporations, supposedly defending free enterprise, but really just fighting any regulation. These weren't fringe lunatics. These were board members of America's largest corporations. These were the guys who played golf with senators and had the president's phone number. And they wanted to install a fascist dictatorship. Here's how the plot was supposed to work. Step 1. Recruit Smedley Butler to be the public face. Why Butler? He was the most decorated Marine in US history. He'd won the Medal of Honor twice. Veterans trusted him. He was perfect. Step 2. Use their money to organize 500,000 veterans into a private army. They'd claim it was about supporting veterans, but really, it was a paramilitary force. Step 3. March on Washington in what they called a peaceful show of force. Butler would give a speech. The veterans would surround the Capitol. Step 4. Force Roosevelt to create a new position. A Secretary of General Affairs who would handle all the real work while FDR became a figurehead. Basically, make him a puppet. If Roosevelt refused, the implication was clear. The veterans would remove him by force. They literally showed Butler documents outlining how Mussolini and Hitler had done it. They said, "We want to do that here, and we want you to lead it." The conspirators told Butler that fascism was necessary to save capitalism, that democracy had failed, that strong leadership, their leadership, was what America needed. One of them actually said to Butler, "We need a fascist government in this country to save the nation from the communists who want to tear it down." The irony, FDR wasn't a communist. He was trying to save capitalism from itself. But to these guys, any regulation was tyranny. Now here's what makes Smedley Butler absolutely fascinating. He was the perfect guy for them to recruit, but he was also the worst guy they could have chosen. Butler had spent 33 years in the Marines. He'd fought in the Philippines, in China, in Central America. He'd overthrown governments for American business interests. He knew exactly how this game worked. And by 1933, he was done with it. Butler had realized that his entire military career had been spent as, in his words, a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. He'd helped make Haiti and Cuba safe for the National City Bank. He'd helped make Nicaragua safe for the Brown Brothers investment house. He'd helped purify Mexico for American oil interests. He'd literally written a book called War is a Racket, exposing how corporations profit from military intervention. So when these wealthy conspirators approached him, Butler played along. He met with them. He listened to their pitch. He asked questions. He got names. And then he went straight to Congress and exposed the whole thing. In November 1934, the House Un-American Activities Committee began investigating Butler's claims. Butler testified under oath. He named names. He provided details. He had witnesses. A journalist named Paul French, who'd attended some of the meetings, corroborated everything. The committee's final report, released in February 1935, concluded, "This committee received evidence showing that certain persons had made an attempt to establish a fascist organization in this country. There is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient." Let me repeat that. Congress confirmed that wealthy Americans had actually plotted to overthrow the government. So what happened to the conspirators? Absolutely nothing. Not one person was indicted. Not one person went to trial. Not one person faced consequences. The investigation was quietly shut down. The final report was buried. The major newspapers, many of which were funded by the same corporations involved, barely covered it. The New York Times gave it a few paragraphs and treated it like a joke. The conspirators claimed Butler had misunderstood them, or exaggerated, or was seeking attention, and the establishment closed ranks to protect them. Here's what haunts me about the business plot. These corporations didn't face consequences, and many of them kept doing exactly what they'd planned, just more quietly. DuPont and GM, they kept building fascist sympathies, literally supplying the Nazi war machine even after war broke out. Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle from Hitler in 1938. The American Liberty League kept fighting the New Deal, using the same arguments, that regulation was tyranny, that strong business leadership was what America needed, and the playbook they created: use veterans as a political force, wrap corporate interests in patriotic language, claim that helping ordinary people is socialism. We're still seeing it today. The business plot failed because one man chose country over personal gain. But think about how close it came. If Butler had been more ambitious, or more cynical, or just more willing to believe that democracy had failed, American history changes completely. What does it say about America that our largest corporations were willing to install a fascist government to protect their profits? What does it say that not one of them faced consequences? The business plot proved something terrifying. In America, you can literally plot to overthrow the government, and if you're wealthy enough, you'll get away with it. Butler said it best. "I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism." The difference between corporations and the mob. The mob doesn't write the history books. If you're not angry yet, hit that subscribe button and let's keep exposing the crimes they buried.